Hello, friends. My name is Erin Hawkins, and I'm the General Secretary of the General Commission on Religion and Race. I want to welcome you to the fourth installment in the Vital Conversation series, Race, Culture, the Church, and Human Sexuality. Given the current discussion in the United Methodist Church around the ordination and marriage of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, and queer persons, we offer this resource for your discernment. There are those who question why G-Corps is involved in the conversation about human sexuality. To this we say, as the agency responsible for lifting up the voices of those historically marginalized, we believe that any discussion about the future of this denomination must include those voices. We encourage you to watch these videos and to discuss them with those in your church and community, as together we discern a way forward.
Hello, my name is Phil Cabucci, and I'm a member of the LGBTQ community here in Nashville, Tennessee. I have lived in the community for 10 years, and I currently am the President Emeritus of Nashville Pride.
Hello, my name is Paul Galloway. I am a Nashvillian and an American Muslim. And for the last 16 plus years, I've been involved in advocacy on behalf of the Muslim community, leading various nonprofits at the state level in Texas and in Tennessee. Phil, it's so good to see you again.
It's great to see you. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, we first met right after the Pulse shooting.
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
Under crazy circumstances.
Yeah, it was a really trying time for the LGBTQ community for sure. And I'm sure it affected your community as well in a major way.
The way we met, I thought, was really interesting. My boss spoke at the mayor's rally to support the LGBT community, and that was a worrying step for our organization because there's so many issues with the Muslim community feeling under pressure to answer for things that maybe they're not responsible for, and then relationships with a whole new community. And then I'm praying, and then as soon as I finish praying, I stand up and we shake hands. And then I never thought that would lead to me speaking at your event.
That particular moment when I saw your group praying, and then the involvement of different Muslim leaders in our community at that event, it meant so much to our community to have a full representation of multitude of different faiths. But the fact that you were there and that your group spoke and that you were praying and that you were involved, I think meant a lot to our community, and it opened the doors for really powerful and moving conversation.
It's so funny that such a small gesture can mean so much because our community, quite honestly, was very concerned about how to be involved, how to be supportive, and frankly, balancing how to help our own community, who very often are ignorant or unaware or sometimes even homophobic, how to present the need to just stand up for people's human dignity and value. And not have to cross all those other thresholds. It's a really interesting dynamic, and it means a lot to us to know that just being brave enough to show up meant something. Nobody had an issue about speaking for human dignity, right? The concern was, will this look like we're apologizing for something we didn't do, right? Because a member of our community was the shooter.
Right.
And the whole guilt by association thing, I mean, you're not at all unaware of that, of course.
Right.
But that dichotomy of having all of those issues converge at once, and then what was so refreshing was to see how many Muslims came out. And all of the key leaders in the city were there, all the imams, all of the activist leaders, and then just so many members of the community. And it felt good. And then what was so amazing afterwards was people showing us respect while we're praying. Because normally we're afraid to pray in public, right? Yeah. And we fear that, if we're saying our prayer, someone's going to do something to us. And so I think, in a way, not only was it meant to be for us to meet, but I think we learned a lot about ourselves and about the city just by showing up.
I think what was the most special for me, though, is, after that event, which was early in June, just 2 weeks later, you agreed to speak
Right.
at our Spirituality Night event, which is an interfaith service for members of the LGBTQ community, and every faith was represented. And the fact that you were there to just speak your truth was really empowering to a lot of people who were really hurting. And you can tell by the tone in that room that night was just, there was a heavy weight. And I think that the words that you provided and the encouragement that you shared was able to lift some of that weight.
Just taking all of that in, two things really stood out to me. One was that we all have the same feelings, and that pain is pain, right? And I felt it was weird because in that room you felt a lot of pain and you also felt a lot of hope at the same time. And being able to go up there and say, hey, I am an Orthodox Muslim, and make that the first words I said, so that people who know what that means know that I have a fairly conservative viewpoint on morality and on sexuality. But then to be embraced after just saying, but I'm here because you're a human being, and if I look at the larger picture, faith should always honor life.
I think what's really special about our interfaith nights with Pride organizations is that everyone who shows up is there to not only be together and share faith or spiritual messages or just messages of hope and encouragement, which is what you did. But everyone comes with this understanding that you are there to remember the God of your understanding, or to participate in some kind of a worshipful activity for your faith community. And it's something that we can bring everybody together and share in a really special moment before we move into a much different celebration of LGBTQ culture.
Something for me that stood out about that night as well, and it's something I've been struggling with a lot as an activist and a leader in the community. This idea that you have to have like 100% alignment on or agreement before you can really partner with somebody, or before you can work together towards a very basic and common cause. I think that's the takeaway for me. Was the most refreshing thing about meeting you was that basically just kind of remember that book, Everything I Needed to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten, right? Just the golden rule, allowing people to be who they are, and then just having mutual respect, and not forcing alignment on anybody or trying to make each other have the same viewpoint. And that's refreshing because you don't see that always in the faith community, and you don't see that amongst activists either.
Well, I understand. I mean, I grew up in a faith community myself, and so I understand the idea of loving one another, but that's just a natural human trait, right? That's something that we should be able to do naturally. It doesn't matter what our belief structure is behind that, or if we're LGBTQ or whatever we might, align with. And at the end of the day, kindness is the new cool, is what I like to say, right?
God, let's make that so.
Right?
And ultimately, I think what's happening is we're creating a newer safe space that hopefully is growing. And I really liked what you said about the Pride being an expression of love for everybody, because if someone's confident again walking into that environment, they're not saying, I endorse everything about this person. They're just saying, I endorse that we should all be happy together, we should all be a society together, and be able to do that.
I see the 13-year-old who hasn't come out to their family yet, or hasn't even come out to their friends, but they know that they feel different. Right? Or you think of the 16-year-old student who, in their head, says that they are a woman, but they have male parts. And they're going through the transition or the transgender understanding process. The amount of shame and stigma that goes with that. But then you also think about someone who's in their 20s or 30s who's contracted HIV. And the stigma that goes with that. Stigma ultimately can kill, and it does affect every single one of our youth in our communities, whether it's the Muslim community or an LGBT community. The more that we are mired in the shame, guilt, and stigma of our differentness,
Right.
the more it can divide us and then destroy us.
Well, and the saddest thing about that is, especially with children, you're taking someone who's trying to figure out their place in the world, and then you're just compounding pressure on them.
Yep.
And then you're surprised when something unhealthy happens.
Yeah.
And it's like shame on top of shame at that point. It's
Right.
like you're blaming the victim because you created an environment where they don't know where to go get help. And I'm sure the issue about being true to yourself as an LGBTQ person is ridiculously difficult. But, and as an analogy in the Muslim community, feeling that people judge you because of the actions of some horrible person in another country,
Right.
and the headlines and all of that stuff, literally, and then thinking that the people who are charged to protect you are the ones that are actually perpetuating that pressure upon the student. We've had cases where the teachers are actually saying bigoted things towards the students because they're Muslim.
Again, like I've said before, the more that we can do to have these conversations that not only impact parents, but the youth and other communities, the more that we can do to educate and change the conversation or shift the conversation to be more positive, and know that at the end of the day, I love you, you love me.
Yep, absolutely.
In a brotherly, righteous kind of way, right? Righteous brothers. That we may not necessarily just agree on every single piece of morality, but we know that we care about the people in our community, whether they identify as LGBTQ or Muslim or Catholic or Methodist or whatever it might be, so that we can start, changing culture ultimately.
It's always a pleasure to hang out again, and we need to do this more often.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, people will also reach out and make new friendships.
That's the goal, right?
Yes,
That's the goal.
absolutely.
Paul, thank you so much. It's been
Hey,
really
man,
great.
it was great to talk to you.